Morning.
Morning.
Hi, Ramon. Cora, good morning.
Good morning,
Ramon.
Joey.
Good morning, Cora.
Good
Morning,
to see
Joey.
you again.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you. Are you still in Monte Alegre, Ramon?
Oh, no. I've been back a week. I'm going back there. I'm going back there in 2 weeks.
Wow, good for you.
I decided I'll do 3-week blocks, depending on the meeting.
Oh, that's
But,
nice, sir.
Danielle is still there. Danielle is
Yeah,
still.
10 months and running. I'm
Wow.
actually coming home.
She doesn't plan to come back.
Where does she go, sir, for groceries?
There's plenty of places there. But she
Okay.
also sends her car back from time to time. So she orders things and they get dumped here in our house. And then they get picked up by her car.
Oh, okay.
And she has a partner these days who goes there from time to time. He's a doctor who visits her and also brings stuff for her. We have good participation.
So Trump has been impeached, huh? Now, whether he's been convicted will be another question, though.
Well, McConnell is at least showing signs of being a little more
open. He's open, no?
I think he's seeing the benefits to the Republican Party of banning him from ever running again. So
Yeah.
hopefully.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, everyone. We are about to start our program in a few minutes. Kindly introduce yourselves and identify your organization using the chat box. For members of the press, kindly include the name of your organization in your name, so you can put it before your name in your username. Thank you.
So Ramon, I suppose you're coming out with an opening statement.
Yes, I have been asked to do that. I will do that. Yeah.
Good.
And Gigi and Cora will make statements, no?
I don't know why.
The representative of parents.
I represent the public school system.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
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 On behalf of Philippine Business for Education, thank you for joining us today in our first press conference for 2021. My name is Jovan. I'm PBED Communications Manager, and I will be your host for today. Today is an important occasion as we shed light on the learning crisis in the Philippines and discuss recommendations on how our country can arrest the situation and move towards equitable national development. At this point, allow me to acknowledge our guests this morning. We will be turning off the videos of some of the participants to highlight our guests. So we are joined here today by officials and members of the Philippine Business for Education Board. Kindly turn on your cameras once you are called. We are starting off with Ramon Del Rosario Jr., Chair, Dr. Chito Salazar, President,
Good morning.
Love Basiliote, Executive Director.
Good morning.
We also have Lito Tayag, Accenture Philippines Managing Director.
Papakita mo po right away. Pag tinawag ng pangalan.
We have Ms. Corazon de la Paz Bernardo, former SSS President and CEO. Mike Luz, former DepEd Undersecretary. We have Mr. Jaime Augusto Zobel de Ayala, Ayala Corporation Chair. We have Ms. Rina Lopez Bautista, Knowledge Channel Foundation President and Executive Director. We also have Mr. Edgar Chua, Cavitex Holdings President and CEO. We have Ambassador Jose Quisha, former Ambassador of the Philippines to the United States. We have Val Endriga, Mint College President and CEO. We have Ms. Riza Mantaring, former Sun Life Philippines Chair. Okay, did I miss anyone? Okay, so those are the members of the PBED board. We will ask our members of the PBED board to please keep your videos on so our friends from the press can get a better view of the PBED board. Those who wish to take a photo may do so. Okay. All right. Thank you so much to members of our PBED board. Of course, it wouldn't be a press conference without members of the press joining us today. We are joined here today by journalists from the Philippine Daily Inquirer, Manila Bulletin, Business Mirror, Business World, Philstar.com, Philippine Star, Malaya Business Insight, GMA News, Philippine News Agency, Manila Standard, and we are expecting some to join us in a few moments. All right, thank you so much. To members of the press, kindly just include the name of your organization in your username. So later, when we go to the open forum, we can properly acknowledge. Before we begin, here are a few reminders. This event will be recorded and screenshots will be taken for documentation. Participants' mics will be muted by default. And this event is streaming live on the PBED Facebook page, facebook.com/onepbed. Again, make sure to please include your name and the organization's name in your username so you can be properly acknowledged. All right, now let's get going with the program. I would like to call on Mr. Ramon Del Rosario Jr., PBED Chair, for his opening remarks. Sir?
Good morning, esteemed colleagues from Philippine Business for Education and members of the press. Good morning. We come here together to start this year with alarm bells. There is no sugarcoating this because we need to take a long, hard look at ourselves before we can even move forward. The Philippine education sector is in crisis. The development of our nation is at stake. As representatives of the private sector, we are voicing our concern over the fate of millions of Filipino learners. Our students, as reported by various international assessments, are ranked among the lowest in the world in terms of science, mathematics, and reading competencies. The protracted COVID-19 pandemic has closed our schools and highlighted already existing problems. About 2.7 million K-12 students are out of school this year. What's more, we have yet to see a clear plan to bring our students back to school safely. Let's be clear. Some of these problems of access to quality education have been hounding us for decades. We in Philippine Business for Education have tried to do our part, recognizing the problem is multidimensional and therefore requires a multi-sectoral approach. When the country's leading business leaders founded PBED in 2006, there was a clear goal in mind: ensure that our education system fulfills the imperatives of an inclusive, developing economy. In keeping with this mission, we took clear, tangible steps towards our goals. We worked closely with the national and local governments and lobbied for systemic reforms and meaningful legislation like the K-12 law. We awarded scholarships to promising students who wanted to become teachers and make an impact on Philippine education. We teamed up with the private sector and provided high school graduates with employability support and opportunities that would give them a head start and second chances in the world of work. It is important to note that in pushing for reforms, one cannot go at it alone. Despite our successes, it is clear that we need to do more, much more. We have to rise to the level of the challenges we currently face. To do this, we need to act together: government, industry, academia, and civil society as quickly as possible. We are here today because we have before us a daunting task: put education at the heart of the national conversation and ensure that we all work towards making quality education inclusive and equitable for everyone. Our demands are anchored on a sobering prospect. This learning crisis threatens the growth trajectory of our nation. This will spell the fate of millions of Filipinos, whether they can put food on the table. It will determine the competitiveness of our workforce and whether our businesses will thrive. Ultimately, it will dictate whether economic development will be equitable for all. Today, we are launching a national campaign to drive attention to the learning crisis and urge people to act. We are reaching out to media, to you, our friends in the press, to help us in this cause by shedding light on an issue that needs an urgent, comprehensive response from various sectors of society. To be clear, pushing for reforms in the education sector is not a sprint. It is a marathon. It will take years before we can bear witness to the fruits of our advocacy work. But this reality should not discourage us. Rather, it should energize us to do more so that when the time comes, we will have given the future generations of Filipino learners an education system that they deserve, one that realizes their full potential. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sir Ramon, for providing us a clear context on why we are here today. And now to discuss in detail the education crisis in the Philippines, we are joined by Dr. Chito Salazar, PBED President, and Love Pasiliote, PBED Executive Director. So this portion of the program will begin with Love discussing the education crisis faced by the Philippine education sector, and Dr. Chito Salazar will then provide the recommendations. All right, Love, you may begin.
Thank you, Jovan. We are here this morning to talk about the learning crisis. Why are we calling it a crisis and not merely a problem? Because by definition, a crisis connotes intensity, a turning point, and a time to make important decisions. When we say, therefore, that we have a learning crisis, we mean to say that education access and quality issues are grave, urgent, and must be stopped and reversed. We need to urgently address the fact that many of our children are not going to school, and those who do are not learning the competencies they need to succeed in life. This was true pre-COVID. We imagine that it must be worse now. This learning crisis could not have come at a worse time when the COVID-19 pandemic ravaged the lives and livelihoods of millions of Filipinos and tightened the competition for already limited resources. It is only right to acknowledge that countries all over the world are also facing similar challenges. But if we do not want to be left behind, we need to stop this crisis within our shores. To delve further into this, let me first talk about the gravity of the access issue worsened by COVID. Based on recent enrollment data, more than 2.7 million learners from school year 2019 to 2020 were not able to enroll this school year. This figure does not include children who have come of school-going age but did not enroll, and those who have already dropped out even before last school year. To put things in perspective, this is equivalent to 1 in every 10 enrolled students in their previous school year who dropped out this year. For students who are listening today, in your class of 50, 5 of your friends are no longer your batchmates this year. Well, you can say that at least 25 million have access to education, right? But what kind of access are they getting? We live in a world where information should already be at our fingertips. Yes, yet this is still out of reach to 84% of our learners. In a survey conducted by DepEd during the enrollment period early this school year, out of 22 million public school learners, 1.9 million learners have access to laptops and computers, 6.2 million learners have access to cellular phones, and 3.6 million learners have access to the internet. But this access is really low. And while you can argue that printed modules are being rolled out, how much are they really learning from them? We all know who truly answers those modules. Schools should have addressed this issue and equalized access. Yet, based on data from the Asia Foundation and a study from UPCIDS, around 74% or 34,500 of public schools nationwide do not have available internet, while 5,000 schools still do not have electricity. These schools without electricity are set back by about 12% points in the National Achievement Test. The pandemic heightened the problem on access. Imagine how the pandemic has worsened the quality problem that has already been plaguing the system even before the protracted school closures and the shift to remote learning. This slide shows a map of the learning crisis. I'll pause here before moving to the next section for our friends in the media to appreciate this map. Moving on, let me preface this section by saying that education quality is a bit difficult to measure, and so we will limit our analysis to learning outcomes, a reasonable proxy. Unlike diseases that have symptoms, poor learning is insidious, a slow creeping cancer that could eat you up without you knowing any better. But just like diseases, it's good to have tests done to have a diagnosis. And so we laud the Philippines' participation in recent international assessments, the next best thing in measuring the effectiveness of educational systems. We participated in 3 recent international assessments, namely the TIMSS 2019 that measured the reading, writing, math competencies of our 4th graders, the Southeast Asia Primary Learning Metrics in 2019, CPLM, that measured math and science competencies of our 5th graders, and the Program for International Student Achievement in 2018, the PISA, which measured our math, science, reading, and 21st century skills competencies of our 15-year-old. The diagnosis is bleak. Results show how far we are left behind in all 3 assessments. As you can see in this slide, we were last out of 78 economies in the PISA, last out of 64 economies in the TIMSS, and in the bottom half of 6 participating ASEAN countries in the CPLM. Although it must be noted that the CPLM did not rank, but rank the participating countries. But if you look at the scores, our classmates are the likes of Cambodia and Laos. Agreed that rankings aren't everything. but the trends are worrying. The TIMSS 2019 result also showed a steep decrease in the performance of our learners in science and math compared to the previous time we participated in 2003. This is happening when STEM skills or science, tech, engineering, and math skills are even more important in a digital world. Not only are the foundational competencies of our students poor, especially in the early grades, we continue to produce graduates with low proficiencies in all subject areas. As you can see in this chart, the red is the proficient level across all subject areas. This is the achievement of our grade 12 students in the DepEd's basic education exit assessment back in 2019. So you might be asking or wondering what are the causes of the low access to and poor quality of Philippine education. Let me share our analysis. First, we are not investing enough in education. Our spending as percentage of GDP is below the Education 2030 Framework for Action benchmark of 4 to 6% of GDP, and if you look at the chart, is on the downtrend. It is also behind our neighbors, Laos, Thailand, and Brunei, that spent 4.2%, 4.1%, and 3.8% of their respective GDPs on education. The ASEAN countries with the highest spending for education in terms of GDP share are Vietnam with 6.3% and Malaysia 6.1%. It should be noted that Vietnam and Malaysia are the two countries with majority of their students achieving the competencies measured, minimum competencies measured in the CPLM 2019. In terms of education budget per learner, the Philippines is lowest among PISA 2018 participating countries, and in comparison to neighboring ASEAN countries. You see here in the chart that we are really at the bottom. The Philippines is marked in or highlighted in red, and our neighboring ASEAN countries in yellow. What we want to do is really be in the upper right quadrant of this chart. But many of our colleagues in the education space do say that the amount of spending isn't everything, right? But we should also be spending on the right things. Evidence from TIMSS 2019 study show that there is a positive relationship between the length of pre-primary education and achievement scores in 4th grade. And yet we lag behind our neighbors in pre-primary investments. We only require 1 year of pre-primary education compared to other ASEAN countries. Not only this, we also need to address the decreased enrollment in kindergarten this school year. They're actually the biggest cohort that was affected because of COVID and the lack of face-to-face instruction, which will bring and this decrease will bring a crucial impact on our learners' performance in the long run. We also argue that the learning crisis, however, does not only happen within the school system. Even before children step foot in classrooms, hunger and malnutrition is already a challenge. In a recent UNICEF study, 1 out of 3 Filipino children under 5 years old is malnourished and thus not ready to learn. For those of you, friends in the media, who participated in our previous State of Philippine Education briefings in years prior, we were already reporting the same number back in 2016, and it hasn't really improved significantly now that we're in 2021. Although our government has established feeding programs, and we do acknowledge that there are programs being implemented to address malnourishment, these programs were not implemented well last year based on the amount of unused funds. So you can see there's a massive drop from the yellow to the red bars in this particular chart. Now, going back to the school system, we also need to look at the performance of a key education input, teachers and teacher quality. The World Bank study in 2016 saw poor content knowledge among our grade 6 and grade 10 teachers across subjects. And you can argue that you can only teach so much, if you don't know a lot. And so content knowledge is really important, especially for grade 10 teachers. And the prospects do not look bright for teacher quality. So because the best and brightest do not go into teaching. This chart shows you the a chart that was, this chart shows you the results of a question that was asked in the PISA, in terms of our 15-year-olds career aspirations, and then correlating that, or not really, and then comparing that to their PISA scores. And as you can see, those who are interested in teaching, which is in the red, scored lower than their peers who are interested in other professions. So from this chart, it can be argued that it seems like the best and brightest tend to not go into teaching. Now the question on mother tongue. Recent studies show, especially in the Philippine context, that mother tongue-based teaching and learning, if done well, positively correlates to better learning. If you take a look at the blue figures in this particular table, there is a strong positive correlation between comprehension and the use of mother tongue. So there's reading comprehension, there's oral reading fluency, and there is a positive relationship between the use of mother tongue and the ability of our students to learn. But this language policy adds a layer of complexity, especially when not implemented well. With the introduction of mother tongue-based instruction at the early primary grade levels and then transitioning to Filipino/English, puts a stress on our teachers who, to be fair, were not trained to handle this particular complexity. In the next slide, you will see the results of an interview of Filipino teachers for the CPLM, and asking them whether they were trained or when they were trained in the language of instruction in our schools. And as you can see here in this chart, many of our teachers were actually trained just in the in-service, or while they're already teaching, or none at all. Comparing that to our neighbors like Vietnam, for example, you see that the dark blue part of their chart is really high, and we want because we want our teachers to be trained before and during and continuously trained while they are in the teaching profession. And so just in summary, in terms of the possible causes of this learning crisis, we are not investing enough in our education system. We are not also addressing the malnutrition problem. And in terms of our teachers and language policies, there needs to be a lot of things that we need to do in order for us to really professionalize the teaching profession, and also make sure that we are able to transition well from mother tongue to our preferred language of instruction. We now have a crisis on our hands. And so now what? To present our proposed agenda for education reform, let me call on Dr. Salazar to share our recommendations. Dr. Salazar.
So good morning to our friends from media. As we see, there is a big problem and a crisis in our education system. And therefore, PBED, through its board, is calling for the following reforms in our system. Number one, we need to address malnutrition and stunting among 0 to 5 children. And this can be done by the implementation of an already existing Philippine Plan of Action for Nutrition, which is headed by the National Nutrition Council. Second, we need to increase the budget and resources for education. Specifically, we've identified the Mandanas 2018 ruling as a potential windfall for LGUs to put in funds for both education and nutrition. Second, we want to make sure that education consistently gets 20% of the national budget, and it should be spent on on fixing our last mile schools. These are schools without electricity or internet or any type of digital capabilities. Third, we want to establish an autonomous assessment agency. It is important that for us to move forward, we need to know where we are. And the only way to do this is through an autonomous agency that is separated from the Department of Education, which has consistently diagnosed our strengths, weaknesses, and the state of quality of our education system. Fourth, we want to infuse the system with the best and brightest teachers through a National Teacher Education Scholarship Bill, which, by the way, we have already filed at the Senate. Number five, we want to bridge the gaps and strengthen the implementation of mother tongue-based multilingual education. We must resist the temptation to reverse this mother tongue-based law and instead move forward and strengthen its implementation. These are our five key our five key agenda points. While we know that there are many other things to do, this for PBED are the things that we must address immediately. Now, next slide. In order to pursue a longer term reform in our system, we also are calling for the formation of a multi-sectoral education commission, similar to the 1991 EDCOM, but it must be multi-sectoral in nature. It must include other sectors in this design of our future education system for the Philippines, including business, including members of the academe and the non-governmental sector, because we all know that it takes a village to educate a child. In addition, while this is pending, PBED itself will lead a private sector-driven group that will also help identify long-term reforms needed by our system. Now, many of you ask, why are many of our changes that we're recommending, many of them seem long-term in nature. However, we have to start making these changes already. We cannot delay our reforms. So the EDCOM should create a vision for a long-term Philippine education system, improve education governance, focus on teacher quality, and really maximize technology in education. Any type of delays in our education system really will bring us even lower down the pole. As you can see, we are already at a low point, and many of our other countries around us are improving their system and moving up, including actually our neighbors in Southeast Asia. We're behind even them in terms of being ready for the fourth industrial revolution. Last but not the least, even inside our country, even just looking at ourselves, if we do not act now, we just simply will lose more in the future. Right now, our baseline is that based on learning adjusted years of schooling, based on a 12-year system, the baseline is only 8.4. Our optimistic guess is that what this means is that our kids are actually only at an 8.4-year level of education in a 12-year system. That's the baseline. The pessimistic estimate, given the pandemic, is that they'll only actually be at 7.6 years of education, making them far not ready for the college education that they want to pursue. What this means in terms of average earnings for our students is that they'll actually be earning only $7,600 as compared to what they should be getting at the baseline of about $8,000. If we do not act now, our kids will fall further and further behind where they should be, and many of them are the people that need an education the most if they want to improve their lives, if you want them to improve their lives. So we do call on everybody, not just the government, but all the sectors involved, to really come together and address this education crisis. We have set a way forward, and I think it's important that we all work together in order to make all of this happen. Thank you, and good morning.
Okay, thank you so much, Love and Sir Chito, for that overview of the Philippine education crisis, along with the crucial recommendations. And now for an audiovisual summary of the previous discussion, please turn your attention to this video and kindly turn off your cameras in the meantime so we can highlight the presentation.
The Philippine education system is in crisis.
The Philippines ranked worst in reading comprehension among 79 countries.
Filipino students scored a mean of 340 points in reading comprehension exam.
Nakita natin yung curriculum natin, napaka-congested, napakasikip.
Lumitaw din sa pag-aaral na 1% lamang ng mga Pilipinong estudyante ang nakaabot sa high benchmarks in mathematics.
Access remains an issue, as well as the quality of education. For the school year 2020 to 2021, 2.7 million students did not enroll. Millions of students were left behind when the pandemic hit. Recent international assessments have ranked our learners among the lowest in the world. These assessments were done even before the global health crisis. We expect the situation to have worsened. We are not putting enough resources in education. Pre-primary education in the Philippines is among the shortest in Southeast Asia. Hunger and malnutrition negatively affect our students' learning experience. Our teachers have poor content knowledge. Our children are taught by teachers who are not trained in the language of instruction during pre-service. To arrest this problem, we need to act fast. We need to address malnutrition and stunting among our school children. We need more budget for education. We need an independent agency to assess our strengths and weaknesses. We need to produce competent teachers who are among the best and the brightest. We need to strengthen the implementation of the mother tongue-based multilingual education. As we move closer to electing our next government leaders, we need to make education a priority. The future of our nation is on the line. We must act now.
All right. We hope that video helped in highlighting the crucial points of the presentation. And now at this point, we'd like to call on some members of the PBED board to further discuss the impacts of the education crisis to different sectors in Philippine society. We are starting off with Mr. Lito Tayag, Country Managing Director of Accenture Philippines, who will be discussing the impact of the learning crisis on employers and industry. Hi, Sir Lito. Good morning.
Good morning, Jovan. Thank you for inviting me to speak here. Good morning, everyone. I'm also the chairman of the board of trustees of IBPAP, the umbrella association of the IT BPM industry. So I'll be giving my comments from this perspective. Our sector today employs more than 1.3 million people, encompassing services in the customer contact, information technology, in-house centers, healthcare, game development, and animation services. During the pandemic, this industry has moved with speed and scale to make adjustments to the work environment that allowed it to continue to provide services to our global clients and maintain stable and high-quality jobs for Filipinos. The foundation of our talent capability in this industry are both English and STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, where we have seen in the presentation that the national achievement scores have been declining. In the short term, the industry employs some graduates straight out of K-12. The education crisis threatens the employability of these graduates. Graduates of K-12 will not be able to meet the skills required by the industry to carry out their jobs. Over the medium to long term, basic education is critical in instilling these foundational competencies needed by workers to succeed in our technology-driven industry. This crisis puts our graduates out of sync of the skills requirements of businesses, which in turn threatens their employability. More so, this learning crisis poses significant risks to our competitiveness as a country of destination for outsourcing and offshoring services, simply because our workers will not have the skills required to carry out their jobs for global services. And as businesses move to automation and extensive use of disruptive technologies, including artificial intelligence, underskilled workers with poor educational backgrounds are at risk of being left out of new jobs that are being created in the workforce of the future. Innovation from companies depends on the ability of the workforce to understand the changing nature of work and adjust and learn new capabilities accordingly. To make this happen, workers have to have good foundation and be willing to learn new skills. This will not happen with students who suffer from poor educational background. And so our desire for the Philippines to be a source of innovation and to provide high-quality jobs in the new digital world is at significantly high risk. The future workforce requires deeper skills whose foundation is developed in basic education. We need to address this crisis that will handicap our future workforce in the Philippines. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Sir Lito, for that wonderful discussion. Important to take note, some takeaways from Sir Chito's insights. is the fact that the future workforce needs deeper skills. And if we are going to have this situation prolonged, then this will affect the employability of our graduates. Thank you, sir. And now to discuss the impact of the prolonged learning crisis on the Filipino family, we are joined by the former President and CEO of the Social Security System, Ms. Corazon de la Paz Bernardo. Hi, Ma'am Cora. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, ma'am, you may start.
Okay. I am a product of the public school system from the elementary grades to high school, and I am proud to say so. One time, I was interviewed over the radio about the Philippine Social Security System. After the session, the radio commentator asked me which schools I went to. When I told her that I went to the Rizal High School in Pasig, the same school my parents and my siblings attended, she remarked, surprised, "Hindi ka pala sosi." So I asked, "Anong sosi?" "Hindi ka pala sosyal na taga-exclusive girls' school." I smiled and said, "No, our high school is the Provincial High School of Rizal, which has produced graduates like Senator Suvito Salonga, Neptali Gonzalez, and Rene Sagisag, and national artists like Lucio San Pedro and Carlos Botong Francisco, and businessmen like Dante Santos, and many other professionals who are successful and highly respected. Many of our alumni are working for companies in Metro Manila area and are doing well. And you would even be surprised to know that CPP, NDFs, Benito, and Wilma Tiamzon are graduates of our school. Good education is a great leveler and allows well-trained and motivated students, a good number from middle income and not well-off families, to rise to their full potential and make their contributions to the upliftment of their families, their communities, their professions, and the country, if not the world. Products of the public school system in the Philippines have made significant contributions to our country's development, like Jimmy Laya, Jerry Sikat, Emil Javier, Chief Justice Artemio Pangaliban, and of course, Washington CC. We would like to see more of the current public school students develop like the people I mentioned earlier. But the future they will live in will be a more complex and challenging world, which would require them to be more adept in the sciences, mathematics, and technology, and be prepared for the fourth industrial revolution. They will also have to continue learning how to learn, such that the reading skills would be essential for their continuing development and success. The result of the tests that were pointed out earlier highlight the very urgent need for reforms in our educational system. We are shown as laggards in developing our young, and this cannot be allowed to continue. The absence of parental supervision in families of overseas workers or of working couples who have little time for their children have aggravated the situation. Those who took the nationwide tests are generally from public schools. Thus, government, through the Department of Education, has its work cut out for it. In an interview with BSP Governor Ben Jokno yesterday by the Business World, he was asked how the Philippine future development would fare in the light of the effect on the economy of the pandemic and the lockdown. The Philippines is reportedly among the lowest in ASEAN in terms of its short-term prospects. The governor struck an optimistic note by pointing out that our young population, well-educated and highly trained, is our biggest asset. How I wish this would continue to be true, or that it's not yet too late to solve this current crisis in our educational system. What are the effects of this deterioration from the perspective of Filipino families? The lack of quality education can lead to and exacerbate poverty, especially for vulnerable sectors of the population. Poverty is an intergenerational problem. The circumstances inherent in being poor have a huge chance of carrying over to future generations if they remain unresolved. Lack of quality education also excludes one from fully participating in society. Families with numbers who lack proper with members who lack proper education miss out on crucial opportunities such as meaningful employment and the full exercise of their civil and political rights. A country's social security system greatly depend on the productivity of the population and their ability to tangibly contribute to economic growth and national development. We should ensure that future generations are prepared to take over the steamship of further generations by providing them with quality education that improves their life chances. As we noted in one of those materials we got from a South African university, the death of a nation results from the death of good education.
Okay, thank you so much, Ma'am Cora, for your insights. Just to reiterate what Ma'am Cora said, good education is a great leveler. And if this education crisis is not addressed immediately and urgently, then this can lead to and exacerbate poverty among Filipino families. Okay, thank you to Sir Lito and Ma'am Cora for sharing their insights and comments about the effect of the learning crisis to other sectors of Philippine society. At this point, we are opening the floor to our friends from the media for our open forum. So for our friends from the press, you may use the reactions button, raise your hand so you will be recognized. Alternatively, if you are shy, you can just type in your questions in the chat box and it will be recognized. Okay. So I guess while our friends from the media are thinking of their questions, I'll start and ask. This question is addressed to Sir Ramon. Hi, sir. Sir, I'd like to ask, how grave is the problem for PBED to call it a crisis? Because we're saying it is a learning crisis. So how grave is it, sir?
I think it is extremely grave, as has already been pointed out by Love and the other speakers. There is no time to waste. We are behind, and as I guess evidenced by the test results that we recently participated in, we are really significantly behind not only the rest of the developed world, but even relative to our neighbors in the ASEAN area. So I think there is great urgency in addressing these issues. That is why we have decided not only to call this a crisis, but to sort of issue this call to arms, this call to come together as a society to address this issue, because it cannot wait. We really need to do this. We need to do this now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have a question from the Philippine News Agency, Chris Mundo. How can we ensure that the existing inequalities in education will not exacerbate amid the pandemic and shift to online learning, since a big number of Filipinos do not have access to high-speed internet connection? Love?
Thank you for that question. I just want to say that it's already worsening. The inequality is already worsening. But if we don't want this inequality to further worsen, PBED actually came out with a statement on the need for a clearer policy on the safe return to face-to-face teaching and learning. As mentioned earlier, there's just so much difficulty when it comes to remote or distance learning, and if we completely just shift to remote and we don't have a clear plan on how we can then safely reopen our schools, your concern about existing inequalities and how they will worsen will will not be addressed. So yeah, in short, we need to have a clearer and a better plan on how we can safely reopen our schools to face teaching and learning.
Thank you
But
so much, Love.
if I may add, I
Yes,
think
sir.
it also ties in with one of our recommendations, which is to address the lack of internet access in many parts of the country, especially those last mile, what we call the last mile schools. But even in some of the large cities, internet access is a major issue. So that needs to be addressed again with great urgency, because that is one of the reasons why it is difficult to stem this growing disparity in access to online education. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Love. We have another question from Meg Adonis from Philippine Daily Inquirer. Meg, go ahead.
Hi, good morning po. This question is addressed to Dr. Chito. So last year the DepEd expressed its interest, or rather it said na the Philippines will still be joining the PISA 2022 despite the challenges in education brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. How do you think will we do in the next PISA despite these challenges?
Well, I don't think we will. I don't think we will do well yet, because a lot of the changes needed to improve the system and to see a better performance in these tests have not yet taken place. However, I don't think this should also scare us away from not participating in many of these exams. I think this is precisely the best way to move us forward. We really need to know where we are in order to make decisions about how to move forward. I do also think that there have been suggestions and calls to improve our participation. I think one of the reasons that we didn't do well in the PISA was because our kids ended up taking the PISA exams in English. So it is actually possible to make a choice that you take it in the local tongue. So we also think that if we do participate, not if, when we next participate in PISA, we request that we participate using our local tongue, as many other countries have also requested.
Thank you po. Just an additional question. You mentioned earlier that one of your proposed agendas for reform was the establishment of an autonomous assessment agency. Can we get more details about this? Who will compose this agency, and what will its goals be?
Well, right now there already is an assessment department within the Department of Education, but we suggest that this be carved out of the department and set up as an autonomous agency because it's very difficult to really test yourself. And also high stakes testings and testings to monitor the outcomes of learning is really something that's done in other countries at a regular basis. In our case, we have not been able to do it consistently. Changing administrations have changed the nature of the test, changed when it is offered, when it is taken, and by what grade levels take it. So in order to provide consistent testing that we can use to compare results across time, I think it's important that we separate the unit. I think as I mentioned, there's already an existing department we can just carve out and make it report directly to the Office of the President, that they can run tests in a regular fashion on their own way to structure and measure learning in the country.
Okay, thank you po. One last question na lang po. You also mentioned a National Teacher Education Scholarship Bill that has already been filed in the Senate. What is the status of this, and what do our legislators think of this filed bill?
We actually got a lot of support when we first proposed this bill, which was our attempt to contribute to the dialogue on how we improve the quality of teaching. Part of the difficulty is we want to encourage, no, part of the difficulty is not the best and brightest who want to take up teacher education often don't have a nearby high quality TEI in their area. And in order to go to a high quality TEI, they'll need more support than just free tuition. They'll also need dorm support, daily food and allowance support. So we want to make sure that all those bright kids who want to become teachers have access to a top-notch teacher education institution. We did get a lot of support. It is in the process of being formally written and filed in Senate right now.
Thank you very much po. That's all from me.
All right, thank you, Meg, and thank you, Sir Chito. We have a question from Roy Canivel, who covers business for Philippine Daily Inquirer, and I guess our members of the board can also participate and answer this question. Does the private sector find the education sector attractive enough to invest in? While I understand that the government should do bulk of the work and invest more in education, I would just like to know if the group thinks there is anything that the government could do to make the sector more attractive for private sector investments. Okay, anyone from our board who wants to answer that question? Go ahead.
I think our chairman should answer that because he's the one in the education sector investing very much in the education sector.
I did not want this press con to be self-serving, but there is enough reason for us to continue investing. I think, it's very fulfilling that we have managed to find a way of providing good quality and accessible education to the underserved sectors of society and scale it up so that we now have a network of schools that has over 70,000 students enrolled and has attracted attention from multilateral and development agencies like the Asian Development Bank and FMO from the Netherlands and a group called Kaizen. I guess what I'm saying is there is an opportunity there not only to serve the underserved sectors, but also to generate, I guess, reasonable returns for the private sector. We talk about our experience in education quite openly, and people ask me whether we are not just attracting competition. I don't view it as competition. I think the more private sector enterprises who come into education with a serious intent of making good quality education accessible to the underserved sectors, the better served Philippine education will be. So, of course, we know the Ayala Group has made a major entry into education. The Yuchenko Group is very much involved in education. Jose Rizal has been privately owned for many years. And of course, the entire religious sector offering education through their schools has also been a prominent contributor to improving the quality of Philippine education. So my answer is, if one does it right and one has the right intentions, meaning to really do something of service to the underserved sectors, there is the opportunity to do that. And there is the opportunity to do that in a manner that provides sufficient returns to those who are looking for a return on these types of investments. It is not earth-shaking returns, but I think it is reasonable and it is good enough so that hopefully more and more from the private sector will be encouraged to consider education as a sector worth their attention and their investments.
Jovan, may I also jump in?
Sure.
So I can also answer both Roy's and Roy Canivel's and Bernie of Manila Bulletin's question as well, which regards private schools. I think first there is no system in the world where basic education is really satisfied by the private sector. Basic education is actually the most important sector in the education system. That's why it's called basic. It provides the basic fundamental learning and the foundational learning needed by students as they go along their careers and lives in the future. And this has always been the purview of primarily the public sector. It being almost, as a matter of fact, in our constitution, that our constitution enshrines the right to a free public basic education, to a free basic education system. However, there is a role for the private sector. And I think, as to answer Bernie Magkilat's roles, in areas, for example, that are difficult to reach, to provide values education or to augment the educational public sector, the private sector can play a role. And the way the public sector can help is actually, instead of building facilities, many of our private sector schools, basic education schools, are actually underutilized because of the shift of kids from private to public, and many of them are under threat of closing. especially in the pandemic, as Sir Bernie pointed out, but actually even before the pandemic, the enrollment in private basic education has been declining because of the growth in the public sector. Rather than grow, we should see the public sector should see the private sector as a complementary partner, where they can, through voucher systems or through support, actually send more kids who have no room or no access to classrooms in the public schools to private schools rather than build, so that they can already maximize existing facilities of private schools and existing faculty. So I think what we should see this as not two different groups of private and public, but one big group providing basic education to our population. And there are ways to work together and to share resources so that both the private and public sectors achieve their goals and visions and manage to service the communities that they're in.
Okay, thank you, Sir Ramon, Sir Chito. So we have answered questions from Roy from Philippine Daily Inquirer, and then Bernie Makilat from Manila Bulletin. We have another question from Bruce Rodriguez of ABS-CBN News, and our members of the board can also answer this question. Aside from clearer policies, what institutional changes must be done by both the private and public sectors to address this education crisis? What are the low-hanging fruits? Anyone from our board can answer?
Okay, I will answer. Actually, many of these items are in many ways low-hanging fruit. First, I think we need to not differentiate, because some of them may seem not low-hanging, but if you don't implement them today, the impacts of not implementing today will really harm the future, like the 0 to 5 nutrition. We have to address this right away. In terms of what can be done quickly, I think if the government provides resources to last mile schools, that's very important. It will also address issues of inequity that might grow due to schools not having access to internet or digital resources. But even even if they might have access to internet, if the school has no electricity, it doesn't matter. So I think that is a low-hanging fruit. We are spending a lot on the build programs. I think they should become part of our build programs, which is to make sure that every school has electricity and potentially access to work with the private sector to make sure they're connected to the internet. I think the teachers' scholarship bill as well, which will, it can be implemented very quickly also. So actually, I think many of these are in many ways things that can be done right away, and so are in themselves low-hanging fruit.
If I may add, Jovan.
Yes, sir.
I think one other, if you might call it low-hanging fruit, but one that can be done immediately, is this this idea that we have come up with, which is with the imminent implementation of the larger share of LGUs in the IRA allocations from the national government, is it the Mandanas initiative or Mandanas bill? I think a significant amount of resources will be made available to LGUs which have not been heretofore available. So I think earmarking a large chunk of those funds for education and perhaps for malnutrition will go a long way in addressing the needs of those two, of education and malnutrition, and of the LGU. So I think that is something that needs immediate attention. If that is in fact going to be implemented imminently, then I think this is the time to seriously consider this proposal, that the bulk of those funds be earmarked precisely for these two very urgent concerns.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sir Chito, Sir Ramon, and thank you to Bruce for his question. We have two questions here, and I'd like to combine them because they're talking about the face-to-face classes, and maybe Love can answer these questions. We have a question from Elijah Feliz Rosales of Business Mirror. When do you think the government should allow the resumption of face-to-face classes? What factors should be considered in making such decision? And then we have Christian Deparin of Philstar.com with a question on what is PBED's proposal on how learning for these millions of students who are out of school to continue despite being out of school, especially since the possibility of holding in-person learning hangs in the balance today.
Thank you for those questions. And thanks, Jovan, for combining them. As you were reading them, I was actually thinking of how to best answer it. In terms of when, I I personally think that we should do it as soon as possible. The reason why is we did simulations actually on, I don't know if you remember the slide that was last slide that was presented by Dr. Salazar on the learning adjusted years of schooling. When we actually lengthen it's a product of many assumptions, and one of the assumptions is the lack of face-to-face teaching and learning. And so if you actually prolong the years, the months of no face-to-face, the learning adjusted years of schooling will go down by a year. And the annual income, the projected annual income of a Filipino goes down by about $500 per year. And so if you add that up, it's really significant, right? So so to answer your question on when we should do it, I think we should do it as soon as possible to really minimize the learning losses. And in terms of what considerations have to be at play, so I think the IATF has come out and the DepEd actually has come out with reasonable considerations that need to be taken into account. But I think, and this is actually also based on studies in other contexts, no, they were looking at the hospital capacity rather than the number of positive cases. They were actually another layer is actually looking at the healthcare system's capacity to deal with these cases should there be a spike. So other than the IATF considerations and the DepEd plan, I think we also need to make sure that we look at our healthcare system's capacity to address the issue should there be an increase in the number of cases. On the second part of the question on how we can address the learning losses for those who have skipped school, the ALS actually provides a good system because you need to understand why these kids have skipped school. So if you look at the per grade level enrollment numbers, those who actually skipped are many of those who skipped school this year are in the junior high school level. So that's grade 7 to 10. And it's because they are already of working age. They can, help out in their families, and it's a very tough time for everyone. And so what we can do actually to make sure that they don't also just completely lose out on this academic year is to give them and offer them modular type of learning and instruction. And the ALS system actually offers that, and it's designed for older learners. And so we think that if we strengthen that and we actually have a more concerted effort to address that particular type of learning losses, then we can minimize a bit the losses that those who skipped out on school this year will experience or are projected to experience.
Okay, thank you so much, Love, and thank you to our journalist friends for asking that question. We have a question from Jovel and Rita, news producer from GMA News. And I think Sir Chito can answer this question, and also members of our board, if you would like to join in. In suggesting the establishment of the Education Commission, the EDCOM, are we saying that we're not satisfied with how the DepEd handles the crisis? Why and why not? And what should the DepEd improve in terms of its communication with the education sector, if there's any?
No, I that's not what we're trying to say. I think many of these problems are systemic in nature and they go beyond any particular administration or any particular DepEd. The decline as a matter of fact, chances are that this decline in the students who took the most recent tests probably began even before this administration. And as we mentioned, now malnutrition is something that is endemic and has been a problem all around. So it is not. This is our statement is not a statement or a critique of any particular administration or any particular leadership in DepEd right now. It really is a call to everybody to come together and address really fundamental key concerns that should have been addressed maybe a decade or even more ago. So the EDCOM is a call because the changes that need to take place go beyond a particular one group. I don't think it is something that DepEd itself can address. I think, as Love pointed out in her presentation, the ages of 0 to 5 are vital in the learning of a child, and for their entire future. And this is actually out of the purview of DepEd right now. Although Kinder has come under the DepEd, other issues such as the proper nutrition, preschool, which is even pre-Kinder, which is seen as important, is right now not under DepEd. So it takes more than just one department to solve this problem. Issues of funding, issues of dealing with the LGUs, accountabilities of the LGUs. These all go beyond one particular department. That's why it needs a EDCOM, which brings together all stakeholders and not just one particular department or government only or private sector only, but everybody to work together to identify the most important priorities. Now, in terms of communication, we actually think that we have worked very closely with DepEd, and we actually are in agreement with a lot of the things that we've been thinking about. I think, if anything, it's DepEd that might need the support of more sectors and more groups to back up their thrust. To be fair, DepEd actually, the secretary herself, emphasized the importance of pivoting to learning, meaning not just the importance of access, but the importance of learning. It's not just give everybody access to school, but make sure that they learn properly. And that has been a call of Secretary Liling. So we actually want to encourage that call and encourage more people to actually support the directions that they're choosing. And we can all work together to really make all of this work.
Okay, thank you, Sir Chito. We have another question from Manila Bulletin, Bernie Magkilat. I think Sir Ramon can answer this question. Sir, we are talking about private schools or the private sector investing in schools. So Bernie's question goes, what should government do to make these private, basic, and primary schools continue and become more profitable? Because they are business ventures, but they are losing students and teachers. For one, most cannot even compete with the teacher salaries in public schools.
The problem in basic education is more pronounced, particularly private schools that are only in basic education. And the ability to compete has become more pronounced because there is clearly a shift from the private schools to the public schools because of free tuition and I guess the quality of those schools improving. It is difficult to envision any particular government support. So I think, as maybe Chito pointed out earlier, the way to think of it is one system that complements each other. And the private sector perhaps playing a complementary role, particularly in areas where the private sector is unable to serve. For example, in Metro Manila, there's a lot of demand for basic education, but many of the public schools have run out of physical space. It's just a simple reality that there is no more room to expand. Here, the private sector can come in and participate in providing basic education. And as Chito pointed out earlier, perhaps some of the factors that can be helpful is using space that is already available in the private sector and make those usable by public schools instead of continuing to look for space and continuing to build buildings. I think the approach, for example, to K-12, where a voucher system was developed, is a good example of how there can be complementarity between the private and the public school systems. That model, I think, is a good model to look at as a way of being helpful to each other. So maybe it's the overall mindset of looking at the system as a system of complementarity between the two sectors rather than two separate sectors competing with each other is probably the more beneficial way of looking at it. I don't know if Chito wants to add to that and clarify it.
No, sir. I think that was correct, and I agree completely.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any members of our board who would like to add, or if you want to answer a question, or if you have other insights you'd like to join in on the conversation, you may do so.
Maybe Rina. I mean, Rina Lopez might want to add a little bit more about. We have not talked about online or off or education that is not face-to-face, and the prospects in that sector might be interesting. May I invite Rina? some comments.
Yes, Ma'am Rina.
Is Rina still around? No?
She just
Okay.
Hi. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that as a surprise, Rina, but I think it's a good opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this opportunity to talk about, the crisis, no, the learning crisis that is happening today in, all over the world, in many places in the world, but especially here in the Philippines, no. And I believe that it is really something that we should all be um, uh, concerned about and do something about. Because as what was said, our nation can just be as good as the education that we provide. No, and it's all of us. No, it's our business to make sure and to contribute um, to the education of our children. And a lot of the um, suggestions and recommendations given today are really something that we need to look at and continuously support. Um, we we talked about as well the learning environment. No, we talked about uh, being able to provide learning resources um, that that are needed by our children. And so when we look at being able um, to support our children even today, no, with digital learning resources for them to learn even remotely at home, while face to face is not allowed. That for me is something that we will need to do, because it's not just for the time now that there is a pandemic and face to face is not allowed, but even after that, digital resources are very important, no? Which is why one of our recommendations also is the digital transformation of the education system. What this pandemic has done was also to highlight the need for us to transform our education and go into really 21st century learning. And so it's actually accelerating that need, no. And so we need to move towards that as well, and for a more digital education. So while face to face for me, for us, is very important, being able to provide learning resources in the digital space and access to that is also very important. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Rina.
Thank you.
Ma'am Rina is the President and Executive Director of the Knowledge Channel Foundation. Okay, I will just return to a question from Jillian Cortez from Business World. A while ago, we are talking about the Autonomous Assessment Agency, and Jillian has a follow-up question. Actually, sorry, Jillian, we skipped your question, but there's another layer to her question on the topic. Would like to emphasize on the proposed assessment agency that is separate from the DepEd. Has this been proposed to lawmakers? Assessment is important to address the problems in education, but how do we manage this when sometimes it's not the learning system itself, but also limitations in infrastructure for areas?
Thank you, Jillian, for that question. we have mentioned it, we have discussed this with lawmakers, but we honestly have not yet prepared a bill. This is something we will be working on over the next few months, and hopefully we can find someone who will help us who will sponsor the bill for us. In terms of, there are many ways to do the assessment, so it's not as difficult as it seems. No? Even the way PISA and TIMSS does it, which is not through 100% testing, but actually through a sampling, through a good sampling of the population, is one way to do it. So you don't need to test the entire population every time in order to get a measure of what the state of the system is. However, for high stakes exams, which is like an exam that you need to take to go from one level to another, maybe not for every year, but either to measure outputs of a junior high school system or a senior high school system, then everyone will need to be tested. Now, I agree with you that the problems are complex. It might involve the quality of our facilities, infrastructure, etc. But I think our point is we'll never be able to know whether our reforms and whether the things we're doing is improving the system if we don't track it properly over time. Actually, it's very difficult for us to track the tests, to compare tests over the past years, more than maybe the past 2 years, because the tests have not been the same. They've been given to different years. So we need to develop a way to track our learning progress to different periods in time.
Okay, thank you, Sir Chito, and thank you, Jillian, for your question. We have a few more minutes left. If anyone wants to add another question, or if members of our board would like to share their comments and other insights. Okay, any more questions from the press? I would like to remind our members of the press to please check your emails immediately after this press conference, because we will be sending you the materials, which includes a press release and also the statement of the organization about the learning crisis. Okay, so it looks like there are no more questions. Okay. All right, so that ends our open forum for this morning. There you have it. Thank you for joining us in what has been a meaningful discussion on the learning crisis in the Philippines. Please join us again in our future events in Philippine Business for Education, and stay tuned for more updates on our campaign. As what Sir Ramon has said, we are launching a campaign on the learning crisis, so please stay updated and be on standby for our future events. Again, please expect a copy of the press release and the statement after this program. If you have more questions, feel free to send us a message at communications@pbed.ph. You may also visit pbed.ph and check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/onepbed. And before you leave, help us improve on how we organize these events in the future. Please answer the poll that will be flashed now on your screen. There are 4 poll questions. You have to scroll down for the 4th question. Okay. For those watching us on Facebook Live, please answer our live streaming poll. Your inputs and suggestions will help us improve on how we conduct these events in the future. Okay. All right, again, on behalf of Philippine Business for Education, thank you for joining us today. This has been Jovan, PBED Communications Manager. Thank you to our board, to our friends from the media. Good morning and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Also,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Juan Del Rosario, thanking our friends from media and our trustees who joined us, and all of our other friends. Thank you so much for being here. And Jovan and Love and Chito, congratulations. Very well done. Very well organized.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, dear trustees and friends from the media. Salamat. Have a good day.
Thank you.